They told us to fear them. For decades, we were warned about the dangers of starchy foods, especially one humble ingredient that appeared on nearly every American dinner table: potatoes. Too many carbs, they said. Too risky for blood sugar. But here's the truth that will likely surprise you. In my 35 years of guiding older adults through diabetes management, I've seen one consistent pattern. The foods we fear most are often the ones we understand least. And what if I told you that, when prepared the right way, potatoes can actually lower blood sugar and offer stable, nourishing energy instead of harmful spikes? Let's talk about a discovery that changed how I counsel patients. A clinical nutrition study published in a peer-reviewed journal found that cooled potatoes, yes, potatoes that have been cooked and then chilled, develop a special form of starch known as resistant starch. This starch behaves differently in the body. It resists digestion in the small intestine, moves into the colon, and feeds beneficial gut bacteria. The result? Slower glucose absorption, reduced blood sugar response, and better satiety. In simpler words, you stay full longer, your sugar doesn't spike, and your digestion actually improves. I've worked with dozens of seniors who dreaded potatoes for years. But when they learned to prepare a simple cold potato salad with olive oil, fresh herbs like dill or parsley, chopped eggs, and a splash of lemon juice, everything changed. They felt lighter after meals. Their afternoon fatigue disappeared, and their glucose readings began to level out. One of my patients, a retired firefighter from Ohio, used to skip breakfast entirely out of fear. Now he preps roasted red potatoes on Sundays, chills them overnight, and tosses them into breakfast bowls with eggs and spinach. His energy levels are steadier, and his A1C dropped by nearly 1 full point over 6 months. The trick isn't avoiding potatoes, it's knowing how to use them wisely. Potatoes eaten hot and mashed can flood your bloodstream with glucose, but chill them for a few hours. Add some healthy fat like olive oil, and suddenly that same vegetable becomes a partner, not a threat. This isn't magic, it's biology, and it's backed by more than just anecdotes. Clinical trials, including one from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, confirm that resistant starch helps moderate post-meal sugar levels in both diabetic and pre-diabetic adults. You don't need to banish potatoes. You need to give them a second chance under the right conditions. And more importantly, you need to listen to your body, not just the outdated labels. The next time someone tells you, "You can't eat that," remember, it's not the food that's dangerous, it's the misinformation. You wouldn't believe how often fear, not food, drives our choices. I've seen it firsthand in countless patients who push away the foods they once loved, not because their bodies rejected them, but because someone once told them they had to. That's not living, that's surviving. But when we begin to understand how to prepare certain foods differently, a whole new door opens. And it's not just about potatoes being safe, it's about them being actively beneficial when handled with a little knowledge and intention. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a Sunday afternoon. The house smells like roasted potatoes, slightly crisp on the outside, warm and comforting. Now, instead of rushing to the table to eat them piping hot, you let them cool, just slightly. Maybe you even chill half of them for later. This small act cooling turns a fast-burning carbohydrate into a slow, steady source of fuel. Add a protein like grilled chicken or salmon, toss in some leafy greens, and suddenly, you've built a plate that not only satisfies, but stabilizes. The people I work with are often surprised when they start experimenting this way. One woman in her late 60s from North Carolina told me she used to get lightheaded by noon, even after breakfast. We adjusted her morning routine. She swapped her sugary cereal for a breakfast hash with chilled cubed potatoes, spinach, and a poached egg. Within weeks, her mid-morning crashes stopped. Her energy smoothed out. Her mood even lifted. There's something powerful in reclaiming a food you were once told to fear. It's not just about what goes on your plate, it's about what happens in your mind and body when fear turns into confidence. Some of my patients even report that their joint pain eased when they started eating cold potatoes more regularly. While it's still being studied, researchers believe that a steadier glucose response may reduce systemic inflammation, which can aggravate arthritis symptoms. Imagine that less pain, more mobility, all from rethinking a side dish, and let's not forget the potato skin. That often discarded layer is rich in fiber, potassium, and antioxidants. It helps slow digestion even further, and it supports gut health, a critical factor for blood sugar balance. When you roast your potatoes with the skin on, you're not just saving time, you're adding nutrition that many people overlook. And if you add a splash of vinegar or lemon juice, you're enhancing the glucose stabilizing effect even more. The point here isn't to glorify potatoes, it's to shift how we relate to food. Your body is wiser than any outdated diet manual. And when you eat thoughtfully, when you cook with curiosity instead of fear, you'll notice that your energy becomes more predictable, your cravings more manageable, and your relationship with meals a lot more peaceful. Here's something I tell almost every patient who walks into my office, especially those in their 50s or 60s who have spent years avoiding the foods they loved out of fear. Your body wants stability, not perfection. That means blood sugar that doesn't jump and crash, meals that keep you full without putting you to sleep, and foods that bring comfort without guilt. Potatoes, when prepared with intention, can offer exactly that. I've seen it play out time and again in real lives, not just in textbooks. I remember a gentleman from Florida who had lived with type 2 diabetes for over a decade. Every winter, his hands would stiffen up with pain so sharp he could barely button his shirt. But after he began adding a few servings of cold potato dishes each week, like lemony potato salad or roasted wedges, chilled and tossed into a salad, something shifted. It didn't happen overnight, but gradually, the inflammation in his joints began to ease. He was able to write his grandkids postcards again without wincing. He called it his potato therapy. And while we laughed about the name, the truth behind it was undeniable. This isn't anecdotal fluff. Scientific reviews have shown that managing post-meal glucose spikes is key to reducing chronic inflammation, which affects everything from joint stiffness to brain fog. And when you pair resistant starches like cooled potatoes with lean protein and non-starchy vegetables, you create a balanced metabolic environment. That's a fancy way of saying your body runs smoother. You digest better. You think clearer. You move easier. What amazes me most is how such a small change, just preparing potatoes differently, can have ripple effects throughout someone's day. One of my patients, a widowed woman in her 70s who lives alone, started prepping a batch of chilled roasted potatoes every Sunday. She'd store them in the fridge and use them throughout the week in wraps, soups, breakfast scrambles, or even cold with a drizzle of vinegar and herbs. It gave her a sense of control, a routine, and more than anything, it brought joy back to her meals. That matters, because food isn't just fuel, it's connection, it's memory. It's a reason to sit down and care for yourself with intention. So, if you've been living under the shadow of food fear, especially when it comes to potatoes, I urge you to step back and ask yourself what's really guiding your choices. Outdated advice? Someone else's experience? Or your own body's wisdom, waiting for you to notice? The best part about this journey is that it's yours. You get to try, adjust, and try again. And what better place to start than with a food that was never your enemy, just misunderstood? There's a kind of quiet liberation that happens when people realize they're allowed to enjoy food again. Especially older adults who've been told for years to live with restriction, not rhythm. I've seen men and women light up with the simple joy of rediscovering a food they thought they'd lost forever. That's what potatoes can do when we stop treating them as villains and start treating them as partners in our health journey. Take, for example, the difference in how your body responds to a hot mashed potato versus a chilled potato salad. The first sends a rush of glucose into your bloodstream, often followed by a crash that leaves you foggy, tired, or craving sugar an hour later. The second digests slowly, thanks to resistant starch and the presence of fiber and fat. The result? A steadier mood, better focus, and energy that lasts into the afternoon. I've heard from many clients who replace their usual sandwiches or pastas with small servings of cold potato dishes paired with protein and greens, and the shift they described was immediate less bloating, no post-lunch fatigue, and a clearer head during those crucial later hours of the day. Even more compelling is the emotional shift that takes place. When people stop labeling foods as good or bad, they begin to rebuild trust in their own judgment. I worked with a former nurse in her early 70s who spent years terrified of carbs. She would weigh every bite, calculate every gram, and still feel guilty after eating. When we reframed the conversation not about cutting carbs but choosing the right form, she started including cooled potatoes in her evening meals. Not only did her glucose readings improve, but she also began sleeping more soundly and reported less stiffness in her legs when she woke. For her, the change was not just physical, it was deeply personal. And this is what most people don't realize. Blood sugar isn't just about what's happening in your veins. It affects how your joints feel, how clearly you think, how deeply you sleep, and how emotionally steady you are from 1 hour to the next. That's why it's not enough to aim for low numbers. We need to aim for better days. Days where food supports your clarity, not your confusion. Where energy rises and stays, rather than fading halfway through a task. Where meals leave you nourished, not numbed. It's not too late to make that shift. And it doesn't take a miracle, it just takes a few cooled potatoes, a little olive oil, and a willingness to listen to your body instead of fear. That's how transformation begins. Not in restriction, but in respect. When I walk through a grocery store with a patient for the first time, I often notice where their eyes hesitate, especially in the produce section. Their gaze will linger on the potatoes, and then, almost reflexively, move away. I'll ask, gently, "Do you miss them?" And without fail, the answer is always yes. There's a kind of quiet grief that comes with avoiding the foods we once shared at family dinners, backyard barbecues, or Thanksgiving tables. But I tell them what I'll tell you now. You don't have to grieve something you can still enjoy, if you just learn how to approach it differently. There's also something deeply grounding about returning to simple, familiar foods, ones that bring back memories but can also move us forward in our health journey. I often encourage patients to do a small experiment, not for the sake of science, but for the sake of self-awareness. Prepare half a cup of cooled roasted potatoes. Drizzle with olive oil. Add some chopped herbs. Eat that alongside grilled fish and steamed green beans. Then wait. Listen. Notice how your body responds, not just your blood sugar, but your energy, your joints, your digestion, even your clarity of thought. That's your body speaking. And it's more accurate than any nutrition label or outdated brochure. I've had patients report that they feel less anxious about food choices after doing this kind of meal experiment for a week. One woman told me that simply knowing she had something ready in the fridge, those cold roasted potato cubes, helped her feel more in control. She didn't reach for cookies when she got hungry in the afternoon. She made a small bowl, paired it with some cottage cheese or a slice of turkey, and went on with her day without the guilt, the crash, or the confusion. That's the kind of empowerment we're after, not just better blood sugar, but better living. Even culturally, food has always been about more than nutrients. It's comfort, it's community. And when we give ourselves permission to enjoy it without fear, everything changes. I often think about one particular family I worked with in California, 3 generations, managing diabetes in one household. They started making a big batch of potato salad together every weekend. It became their ritual, their reset, their chance to connect while also taking control of their health. The teenage granddaughter said she never liked potatoes before, but now she looks forward to their Sunday bowl. That's what food can do. It can heal not just the body, but the space between people. So if you've been asking yourself whether it's safe to bring potatoes back onto your plate, I'll ask you something different. What if the real risk isn't in eating the potato, but in continuing to fear the wrong things? Because once you trade fear for understanding, the path becomes clearer, softer, more forgiving, and that's the kind of journey worth taking. By now, you might be wondering if something as simple as a cooled potato can shift energy, clarity, even joint comfort. Then what else have we misunderstood? That's the question I ask myself often as I continue to learn from both research and real people. And the answer came to me again through another overlooked food, one that shares the same unfair reputation in diabetes circles: the humble carrot. Carrots have been quietly judged for years. Too sweet, they say, too starchy. But let's unpack that with both science and real-world wisdom. Carrots, when eaten raw or lightly cooked, have a remarkably low glycemic index. That means they release their natural sugars slowly, especially when paired with fiber or healthy fat. And beyond blood sugar, they offer powerful antioxidants, beta-carotene in particular, which supports not just eye health, but the inflammatory pathways that affect our joints, brain, and immune system. I remember a man from Michigan in his early 60s who was convinced carrots were off-limits. He'd avoided them for years, even though he loved the taste. When we reintroduced them, starting small, a handful of roasted carrots with dinner, grated raw ones over his salad at lunch, he was stunned. His digestion improved, his mid-afternoon crashes stopped, and something unexpected happened. The dry ache in his knees began to ease. Turns out, those bright orange roots were doing more than feeding his body. They were repairing it. One of the most effective ways to include carrots, especially for those who find raw vegetables too harsh, is roasting. Slice them into thick coins, toss with olive oil and a sprinkle of rosemary, and bake until tender. That simple shift transforms not just the flavor, but how your body responds. The sugars caramelize gently, giving a sweet note without spiking your glucose. And when you eat them alongside lean protein like baked chicken or fish, you've created a blood sugar stabilizing meal that's both comforting and therapeutic. Carrots also carry an emotional value. They're a food many of us associate with childhood, with packed lunches or Sunday stews. Reintroducing them can feel like reclaiming a piece of yourself that got lost in the sea of restrictions. I've seen tears in the eyes of grown men, rediscovering the joy of a roasted carrot, not because of the flavor alone, but because of what it represented. Permission to live well, not live afraid. So next time someone warns you about carrots being too sugary, ask them this: when was the last time you felt foggy after eating a carrot? When was the last time a carrot left you bloated or groggy or aching? Chances are, the answer is never. Because real food, when prepared with care, doesn't harm, it heals. And in this next part of your journey, carrots may just become your silent ally. What fascinates me most about carrots is how quietly they work behind the scenes. They don't shout for attention the way sugar-loaded snacks do. They don't promise instant energy or bold flavors, but they deliver something far more valuable: consistency. And for someone managing diabetes or joint pain or digestive issues, consistency is everything. It's the difference between feeling exhausted by noon and having the stamina to enjoy your afternoon walk, between tossing and turning at night and sleeping deeply through the early morning hours. There was a woman I coached recently from Arizona, a retired teacher in her late 60s. She came to me frustrated, tired of feeling like her body betrayed her every time she ate. We made just one change: a small bowl of warm carrot soup with dinner each night. Nothing fancy, just carrots, onions, garlic, a splash of low-sodium broth, and a touch of olive oil. Within 10 days, she reported that her hands felt less stiff in the mornings. She stopped waking up with that throbbing ache in her wrists. Her words still echo in my mind. It's like my body is finally cooperating with me again. That's the power of anti-inflammatory foods when used consistently. Carrots, rich in phytonutrients and natural compounds like lutein and beta-carotene, help reduce the kind of chronic inflammation that sneaks into our lives as we age through our joints, our blood vessels, even our thinking. It's no wonder that older adults who eat carrots regularly report fewer afternoon crashes and improved focus. The body doesn't just digest food, it listens to it. And carrots whisper messages of healing, one meal at a time. Another way I encourage people to use carrots is in blends. A smoothie with cooked carrots, a ripe banana, a splash of almond milk, and a pinch of cinnamon creates a sweet, comforting drink that supports blood sugar stability. Or for those who need something to quiet late-night cravings, a few roasted carrots with a touch of olive oil and a sprinkle of thyme can mimic the satisfaction of a sugary treat without the metabolic cost. These are not diet tricks. These are acts of self-respect. Small, nourishing choices that gently nudge the body back into balance. I've even seen patients use carrot-based dips, like hummus blended with roasted carrots and chickpeas, to stay full between meals. These snacks don't spike blood sugar. They support digestion. And more importantly, they restore the confidence that food can be a tool, not a threat. And in a world full of noise and confusion about what to eat and what to avoid, that kind of clarity is priceless. Carrots won't make headlines. They won't sell books with shocking titles. But they will keep your joints moving, your mind steady, and your meals joyful. And sometimes, that quiet kind of healing is exactly what we need. Sometimes it's the smallest habits that build the strongest foundation for health. I remember visiting a senior living center where a group of women had started a quiet tradition. Every morning after their walk, they'd gather around the community kitchen and add grated raw carrots to their breakfast plates. Some sprinkled it over eggs. Others folded it into oatmeal with a touch of cinnamon. None of them thought it was groundbreaking. But when I looked at their blood sugar logs and listened to how they felt, the impact was undeniable. They had more stable mornings, fewer headaches, less stiffness in their hands. These weren't dramatic transformations, but they were steady, reliable improvements, and for people over 60, that kind of change is golden. You see, your body doesn't always need you to overhaul your entire lifestyle. Often, it just needs one small act of nourishment repeated with consistency. Carrots provide that. They are affordable, accessible, and versatile. You can roast them in bulk on Sunday and enjoy them through the week in wraps, in bowls, even blended into soups. You can boil and mash them if chewing is difficult. You can slice them raw for a crunchy snack between meals. And every time you choose them over an ultra-processed food, you're not just choosing better fuel, you're reclaiming control over how you feel each day. I've guided many older adults to grow their own carrots, even in small backyard plots or container gardens. There's something deeply healing about tending to a plant, watching it grow, and then eating something you nurtured. It connects you to the rhythm of your own body, slower, more deliberate, less reactive. One man in his 70s told me that growing carrots helped him trust his body again. "If I can grow something that feeds me," he said, "maybe I can take care of myself after all." That's the kind of psychological shift that doesn't show up in lab results, but changes everything. And let's not forget, one of the simplest tools we have for nighttime balance, eating the right kind of food before bed. A small serving of roasted carrots with a pinch of cinnamon or a dab of plain yogurt can soothe sugar cravings and help calm the nervous system. Carrots contain natural compounds that support the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone. Combine that with their anti-inflammatory properties, and suddenly you've created an evening ritual that supports both rest and restoration. We often think of food in terms of what it adds or subtracts from our blood work. But food is so much more than numbers. It shapes our energy, our clarity, our confidence. It influences how we show up for the people we love and how we move through our day. And carrots, simple, quiet, nourishing carrots, have a place in that story. I've always believed that the best health choices are the ones that feel good in both your body and your soul. That's what makes carrots such a powerful ally for those of us navigating life with a few more years behind us and, hopefully, many more ahead. They're not just a vegetable. They're a reminder that eating well doesn't have to be complicated, expensive, or extreme. It can be simple. It can be beautiful. And it can fit into the life you already have, not the one you're trying to force. One of my favorite recipes to recommend is carrot and apple slaw. It's light, crisp, and so easy to make. Just grate a few carrots, toss them with thin slices of apple, a little lemon juice, and a drizzle of olive oil. That's it. You've got a side dish that's bright, anti-inflammatory, supports digestion, and offers a hint of sweetness that quiets cravings without sending your glucose soaring. This kind of meal doesn't scream diabetic-friendly, but it is. And better yet, it's family-friendly too. Grandkids love it. Friends ask for the recipe. It becomes part of your table, your rhythm, your way of living. Not a prescription you dread following. Over the years, I've seen so many people shift their relationship with food through little moments like this. A woman in her early 70s who added roasted carrots to her dinner and found she no longer needed that extra pillow between her knees at night. A retired mechanic who started eating carrot soup twice a week and said his hands stopped locking up during his morning crossword. These stories aren't flashy, but they are real. They're the quiet victories that build resilience and remind us that healing is not just possible, it's already in motion when we choose better fuel. And let me be clear, this isn't about turning carrots into some magical cure. No food works in isolation. But when you consistently invite in ingredients that support rather than sabotage your balance, you begin to tip the scale toward wellness. Carrots, with their natural fiber, gentle sweetness, and deep nutritional profile, are a tool you can use every day to steady the ride. They won't solve everything, but they'll make your foundation stronger, and from that, everything becomes more possible. I want you to think about what it would feel like to sit down to a meal and know that every bite is working with you, not against you. That's what this journey is really about. Not discipline, not restriction, but alignment. Finding the foods that nourish you, comfort you, and move you closer to the life you want. And sometimes, those foods are the ones you've overlooked for far too long. Maybe now is the time to bring them back, and to bring yourself back with them. It always amazes me how much power lies in a simple choice. A small shift in how we prepare a food, or how we view it, can ripple outward into something much bigger, into how we sleep, how we move, how we feel in our own skin. Carrots, in their quiet way, offer that kind of shift. I've seen it in so many lives, including one patient who had struggled with late-night sugar cravings for years. She told me that no matter what she ate for dinner, by 8 or 9 in the evening, she found herself rummaging through the pantry for cookies or crackers. It was a ritual she hated, but couldn't seem to escape. We tried something different. Instead of fighting the craving, we redirected it. She started roasting a few carrots with cinnamon and storing them in the fridge. At night, when the urge hit, she'd warm a few pieces and drizzle just a whisper of honey over the top. Within a week, something shifted. Not only did she stop needing processed snacks, but she started sleeping better. Her digestion improved, and for the first time in years, she didn't wake up feeling like she had already lost the day before it began. All from a carrot, a little spice, and a new rhythm. Frozen carrots can be just as useful. If fresh produce feels like a burden financially or physically, know that frozen vegetables retain nearly all of their nutrients and can be just as healing. Steamed or roasted straight from the freezer, they offer comfort, consistency, and nourishment with none of the stress. Many of my clients, especially those on fixed incomes, rely on frozen options as part of their weekly routine. It's not a compromise. It's a smart, sustainable solution that respects both your body and your budget. And if you're someone who enjoys breakfast traditions but struggles to find diabetic-friendly options, consider carrot pancakes. Grate a few carrots into your favorite whole grain batter, add an egg or two, and cook them just like you would any morning flapjack. Serve with a spoonful of plain Greek yogurt or a dash of almond butter. You'll get fiber, protein, a touch of natural sweetness, and none of the crash that comes with syrup-laden waffles or boxed cereals. Even better, this kind of breakfast gives your joints the support they need to start the day without stiffness or pain. None of these ideas are complicated. And that's the point. When health becomes too complex, people give up. But when you can lean on ingredients that are simple, affordable, and already familiar like carrots, you build something lasting, not a diet, not a quick fix, a way of eating, of living, that supports your health while honoring your life. There's a certain kind of wisdom that only comes with age, and it often shows up in the way we approach nourishment. We begin to crave foods that don't just fill us up, but that ground us, foods that are gentle on the stomach, kind to the joints, and forgiving to the mind. Carrots, in their most tender form, embody this wisdom. I often recommend one of the simplest, most comforting preparations to clients who are overwhelmed by fatigue or dealing with digestive discomfort. Boiled carrots, mashed gently with a fork, touched with a hint of butter and a pinch of sea salt. That's it. No frills, no fads, just warmth, softness, and balance in every bite. I remember a widower in his early 70s who came to me not because of any major health issue, but because he said he was tired of feeling tired. Tired after eating. Tired when waking up. Tired of second-guessing every choice. We stripped things down. One warm bowl of mashed carrots with his dinner each night. That was the beginning. Within a few weeks, he wasn't just digesting better. He started walking more, sleeping more soundly, even laughing more. He told me that those little bowls of carrots reminded him of the way his mother used to cook, and somehow that brought him back to life in a way no supplement ever could. That's the beauty of real food. It carries memory, emotion, and healing all at once. And it doesn't argue with your body. It supports it. Carrots, in particular, are rich in compounds that support blood flow, which is vital for older adults. Better circulation means warmer hands and feet, stronger heart health, and even improved cognition. Every system in the body relies on blood moving smoothly and efficiently. And every time you eat something that supports that, you're investing in your clarity, your energy, your future. I often tell people that food isn't the enemy. Confusion is. And in a world full of noise-fad diets, conflicting headlines, fear-driven advice, it's easy to forget that healing can be simple, that it often is simple. A carrot, thoughtfully prepared and eaten with awareness, does more for your well-being than any miracle pill ever could. And when you choose it not because you have to, but because it feels right, that's when everything begins to change. So the next time you hear someone say, "Carrots are bad for diabetes," I hope you smile, because now you know better. You've experienced the truth not in theory, but in your own body. And that kind of knowing, the kind that's lived and felt, will always be stronger than fear. There's a quiet kind of power in reclaiming the foods that were once taken from you by fear. Carrots, for many people, symbolize that reclamation. Not just because they're nutritious or because science finally caught up to what traditional wisdom always knew, but because choosing them again is a declaration. A declaration that you're done living by someone else's rules, that you're ready to trust your body, that you're no longer afraid of the dinner plate. One of the most moving things a patient ever said to me came from a woman in her late 60s, living alone in Colorado. She told me, "I don't want to feel punished every time I eat." That sentence stayed with me because it captures exactly what so many older adults have been made to feel after a diagnosis: guilt, anxiety, pressure, and loss. But food should never be punishment. It should be care, connection, a reminder that we're still here, still worthy of flavor, joy, and comfort. So I gave her the same advice I'll give you now. Take this week and make it your test run. Add carrots to at least one meal a day. Roast them, grate them, mash them. Blend them into soups or stir them into smoothies. Don't wait for perfection. Just begin. Watch how your body responds not just in blood sugar levels, but in how you move, how you rest, how you think. The human body is incredibly responsive to small changes made with consistency. You might be surprised by how quickly it says thank you. And when you do feel the shift, share it. Share it with someone who's still afraid. With a friend, a neighbor, a family member who's quietly struggling. Sometimes all it takes is one shared story to open a new door for someone else. That's what we're doing here, not just healing bodies, but building connection, one honest moment at a time. Because when you prepare your meals with care, when you choose ingredients that serve your whole self, not just your numbers, you step into a deeper kind of health, one that lasts, one that lifts you, one that doesn't ask you to give up everything you love, but instead invites you to return to it with wisdom, with patience, and with joy. So pick up that bunch of carrots the next time you're at the store. Roast them until they're golden and sweet. Add them to the foods you already know and love. Let them remind you that healing doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be honest. And you already have everything you need to begin.